Hey guys, Mrs. Fox here with part 2 of 7.2, The Civil War Rages On, or The Civil War Part 2. You're in video 2 right now, so make sure you finished up video 1 before you join us for this one. We were just finishing up this economic effects of war clip, so if you need a second to look at that, go ahead and push pause and do so. Otherwise, here we go, Q3, the Battle of Chancellorsville, taking place in May 1863. Okay, Battle of Chancellorsville, probably the most famous because ultimately, as a result of being around this battle, Stonewall Jackson, one of the most important Confederate generals, dies. Okay, if you looked at Confederate generals in the Civil War for the South, Robert E. Lee would be number one. That was the most important to the Southern cause by far and away, Robert E. Lee. Probably number two on most lists for most important Southern generals would be Stonewall Jackson, okay? And ultimately, he's going to die here in the midst of things happening around the Battle of Chancellorsville. All right, so this is a win for the South, this battle, but it's at a pretty big cost. There's a couple of Union generals there. Here's the thing about the Union. Lincoln, the North, okay, had been really struggling to find good leadership for the North, whereas the South had really great generals right off the bat, and that gives them a really kind of big advantage for the first 2 years or so of the war, as Lincoln is scrambling to try to find as good as generals as the South has. And he'd gone through and fired several people and shuffled people around and stuff, trying to get good leadership. And one of those generals that was hit and miss and had good things and bad things about them was General Hooker for the North, was at this Battle of Chancellorsville, and he is ineffective against General Lee, who's also at the Battle of Chancellorsville for the South, right? And General Lee is the head general in charge at Chancellorsville, and he takes the win for the Confederacy or for the South in this Virginia battle at Chancellorsville, okay? It's at a great loss for the South, though. Although they claim victory here, the South loses way more men than the North does in this battle. And ultimately, Stonewall Jackson is doing a walkthrough of the camps, checking, right, for intruders or anything fishy going on one night. And he's approaching, you know, an area as he's doing his walk around, and the men call out, "Hey, who goes there?" And General Stonewall Jackson doesn't hear him. And they say, "Hey, again, identify yourself." And Jackson doesn't hear him. And so they shoot him. Okay, so friendly fire. It wasn't even the North that shoots Jackson. It's his own men, which was super ironic because Jackson was a beloved general by the South. His men liked him, and he gets shot. Okay, now, he only gets shot in the arm. All right? However, it is a pretty bad blow, okay? And infection spreads and things happen. He catches pneumonia, and about 10 days after he gets shot, he ultimately succumbs from the pneumonia he catches and dies. So if he hadn't have been shot, he may or may not have caught pneumonia, and even if he had caught it because he wouldn't have been shot too, he might have survived. But ultimately, Stonewall Jackson dies of pneumonia, and Lee has a famous quote about, you know, that he might have lost his his right-hand man, even though Jackson had lost his left arm, you know, before Jackson dies, because, oh no, he's injured and he's my number two, I need him, right? So that's kind of the story of Chancellorsville, guys. It is a Confederate victory. For the first 2 years, there's a lot of back and forth, where some Union wins, some Southern wins. Really, there's not a lot of huge progress, and if you counted them up, the South had more wins during the first 2 years. It was not an in-and-out easy battle like the North originally thought it would be, okay? All right, go ahead and draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. And then, of course, there's some video clips for you on Stonewall Jackson as well as the Battle of Chancellorsville you can take advantage of. Okay, moving on, FYI slide, you don't have to write it down. Just listen, listen, listen. Okay, so Jackson's death is a big blow to the Confederate Army. Big blow, okay? Remember, this is like the best, second best general of all the Confederacies. But despite that, General Lee decides that he needs to head north. They've had a few wins in a row, like Chancellorsville, right? And they need to make a showing of going into Northern territory, because almost all of the fighting, really all of the fighting, had been going on either out at sea or in the South. Okay, and Lee knows it's going to change the game if they can start pushing battles up into Union territory and getting wins. Okay, so Lee decides he wants to head north and try to get battles out of Southern territory that's really taken a beating by all of the warfare happening in the South. Okay, so he goes up north to try to fuel Southern discontent with the war. He knows a victory in Northern soil is going to be a big morale booster for the, the Confederacy. And another thing that gets his attention is he intercepts a message about a shipment of shoes, okay, a shipment of boots that was coming in to the town of Gettysburg. Okay, now here's the deal, which is a town up north, okay, in Pennsylvania. Here's the deal. I know, like, okay, a shipment of shoes. Like, why is this, what's the big deal, Miss Fox? Well, you guys got to remember, these guys are marching miles a day in shoes that often are not a good fit, that are falling apart, with socks that are like, they might wear the same pair of socks for weeks, like stinky, dirty, gross, like foot problems were a huge issue in the Civil War. Gangrene and all kinds of fungus and funky things going on with the feet, okay? Any good soldier can tell you, even today, okay, in modern times, ask somebody in the military, you take care of your feet, right? If you have problems with your feet and then you have to be on them all day and marching and in battle and all these things, no bueno, okay? So the shipment of shoes is a big deal because some of his men don't even have shoes or have shoes that are way too big or way too small or falling apart. And foot care is important, okay? So they want to go check out this shipment of shoes and they want to get a win up north. So off they go, okay? So here's Lee going up north to try to cause a ruckus. This will ultimately lead to the Battle of Gettysburg when some Northern troops run into Lee's Southern troops and they both call for reinforcements. And if you ask somebody, name a battle from the Civil War, everyone's going to say Gettysburg before they say anything else. Maybe Antietam would be like number 2, but Gettysburg tends to be the most famous battle of the Civil War for a few reasons, okay? It's about a 3-day battle, and it's most famous because this is the battle that turns the tide in favor of the North. Okay, remember for the first 2 years of the war, it kind of been going back and forth. The South had more wins than the North. It wasn't, no one was really making a ton of progress. The Anaconda Plan had not been fulfilled yet by the Union. Like, it was just kind of going back and forth. The Battle of Gettysburg is the turning point for the North. They're going to win this battle, and then they're going to end up ultimately building and building and building upon that, getting more and more victories. Okay, it's a huge battle too. It's one of the biggest battles that happens in the Civil War. There's 90,000 Union troops and 75,000 Confederate troops. The Union is led by a guy named General George Meade, and the South is led by Lee, who had taken his men up there to look for shoes, right, and get a Northern victory. Thousands of men die. Over 50,000 men total end up dying or are wounded severely or are captured in battle. Okay, ultimately, it was a 3-day battle, so it wasn't a quick victory for the North, but really what kind of nails the victory for the North and puts the last nail in the coffin for the South in this battle is Pickett's charge. Another general that was there was a Confederate general for the South by the name of George Pickett, and Lee orders George Pickett to mount this direct attack on the middle of the Union line, okay, because Lee's goal is to let's get the Union line separated into 2 sections. That'll be easier to finish them off, right? But Pickett's charge was not executed well. His men get all separated and it gets scattered, and it just is a big, huge, fat mess. And instead of driving the Union forces into 2 different groups, it just ends up being this huge free-for-all. And ultimately, Pickett's charge, who is pictured there, Mr. Pickett, is what leads to the Confederacy having to retreat and lose the Battle of Gettysburg. This is the last time that Lee attempts to invade the North, because he's tried twice now. It has not gone well for him, and he will not make a 3rd attempt to try to get a win on Union soil. So ultimately, we will win the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's a big turning point for the Union because it's like a momentum, right? And we start getting more wins after that. Don't forget to take in the video clips, guys. Great extra information there. So a few months after Gettysburg, the battle, Abraham Lincoln makes the decision that a national cemetery will be dedicated to soldiers who have lost their life in the Civil War. And the cemetery is put by the Gettysburg battle land, right? Because remember, that was in the North. And so he goes to the ceremony to open, in essence, this national cemetery dedicated to soldiers, and he gives a speech. It's a very short speech. It's only about 2 minutes. It's probably always listed as one of the top 10 speeches given by any U.S. president in all of United States history. He echoes the word of the Declaration of Independence. He discusses how all men are created equal. He hopes that the nation can stop the war and, heal each other and move forward. It's an amazing speech. It's easy to understand for, the common man. It's beautifully written, and I suggest that you listen to it, okay? There's some video clips that have it recorded for you on the next slide. So the Gettysburg Address is just him dedicating this cemetery for soldiers who have fallen, and he's talking about the Declaration, and he's talking about how we're all equal and that this fighting just needs to stop. Okay, very famous speech, and there's of course some video clips on that for you. All right, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Okay, don't forget those left-hand side questions as we're going, guys. Moving on to Q6, the Siege of Vicksburg. All right, well, hot off the tail of the Gettysburg win, the Union will ultimately win the Siege of Vicksburg. Okay, so what happens is this battle will wrap up one day after the Union victory at Gettysburg. So they're right back to back like that. Great press for the Union. Gets everybody a morale boost, right? Two big battles back to back that we've won. And what happens is Grant, who is #1 in all of Union generals for the North, Ulysses S. Grant. Remember, he will end up becoming a president. Lincoln's 16. Grant will be president 18. Okay, but right now he's still just a general, and he is in charge of the Union side. And they are trying to fulfill the Anaconda Plan. They're trying to get hold of that Mississippi River to split the Confederate States into 2 parts, right? And when they win the Siege of Vicksburg, they will have succeeded in doing that, and the Anaconda Plan is well on its way to being fulfilled and successful of separating out the Confederacy into sections. So what they do is they lay siege to Vicksburg, which is kind of up on this hill, and they surround them, not letting anyone in Vicksburg or the troops that are stationed there, the Confederate troops in Vicksburg, to come in or out. And so they lay siege to them, right? They're surrounded. Vicksburg eventually will start running out of food. People will start literally starving to death. Ultimately, they're going to start trying to survive on weird things you wouldn't normally eat, like leather of shoes and tree bark and mules and rats and all different kinds of things like that. And ultimately, the Confederacy will have to wave the white flag and say that they surrender, and this will be a Union victory for General Grant of the Union. Okay? All right, and now the Anaconda Plan is being successful. We've gotten those 2 parts of the Confederacy split in, or the 1 part split into 2. Okay, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. All right, and of course there's some video clips there you can take advantage of. Another thing that the Union has going for it during the second half of the war with all this momentum is another famous Union general, William Sherman. William Sherman will do something across the southern states that is known as total war. It's called his March to the Sea, or Sherman's March to the Sea. And he goes from Atlanta, Georgia to the coast, decimating everything in its path. Total war means it's not just your side and my side shooting at each other and the battle ends. No, total war is burning down everything in your path. Houses, farms, crops, right? Pulling up railroad tracks. They'd take the railroad tracks, they'd tie them around trees. They were known as Sherman's bow ties. These big, huge metal things they tie around the trees, like literally destroying anything usable by the Confederacy. That is total war. We'll keep talking about it in part 3. I'll see you there when you're ready to watch it.